Thank you. Have a seat, Mark, and welcome to Geneva.
Thank you.
I usually start my conferences by asking, since the students come from all over the world, I usually start by asking where our guests come from in terms of where they traveled from today. But I'm going to add today also, how did you come here? Because I will say I came by bike and that was the wrong choice, Mark. How did you come here and
You
where did
are
you come
really brave because, what a miserable gray Monday afternoon, isn't it? So I didn't have a long commute. I came from the other side of the lake. I still live near Vevey, and I took the train. And then, based on your advice, rather than braving it in the rain, I took a taxi from the train station.
It's an excellent choice. I may make the same choice going back, and I'll figure out what to do with the bike now afterwards. Uh, a follow-up question, Mark. I know that you are somebody who's very well traveled. So today you didn't have to come from far, but typically you have lived, I think, in all corners of the world, especially around Europe and the US. Most of the people here today, they have to make a choice going forward as they graduate from EU Business School, which I'm sure is going to happen very soon, about where to build their life and their career. Is there any place right now that interests you or that you recommend people look into?
Look, that question comes on two levels. There is the places where you want to live, where you feel like, you feel at home, it's fun, quality of life is good. And then there's also your careers to watch. And so my first advice to you would be, for this stage of your lives, during your student years and also the early years in your career, get out of your comfort zone. So don't watch so much for the quality of life. Don't watch so much for, where ideally you want to end up. Go and see places because there's a big world out there and there's lots of things to learn. And usually after a few years, you come back a different person because you develop an outside in perspective on who you are. And that is so valuable to put yourself in perspective and not see yourself as the center of the universe. And so afterwards, at a later stage in your career, you can let quality of life and family and everything else kind of come in. But for those formative years, just get on a plane, get somewhere. And obviously, high growth regions of the world where investment goes, so Asia, America, typically tend to be quite rewarding in that regards. But there may be other dimensions you want to discover. So that depends on what sort of career you're aspiring to.
Excellent. And we'll talk a little bit more about where you've built your life and your career in the second half of this conversation. But first, I want to ask you a few questions that are really more current and more business related. So, Mark, because of course you are a guide to business in a way, you are going to become chair of Siemens, which is, I think, by many measures, the largest industrial conglomerate in Europe today. And so people look at you for guidance. Where is the economy headed? What are the big trends? So tell us from your point of view today, what are the macro trends that you're keeping an eye on in the global economy?
Yeah. So look, this is not so much specific to Siemens alone, but for any large multinational company, in case you are aspiring for a career in a large multinational company, they're changing pretty rapidly because the environment is changing so much. Um, when I started my career in 1989, clearly the world seemed headed to a one size fits all system. When WTO came into existence close to here in Geneva, it seemed like there was a global rulebook on how to do business, and it favored large multinational companies very much.
I want to pause you for 1 second because, of course, you mentioned 1989 as if it's any other year in history, but essentially you started your career when the Berlin Wall fell, when the global economy opened up and went towards, it seemed at that time, a global liberalization, free markets everywhere in the world, including in the former Soviet Union.
So entirely coincidental, but my job contract started 9 days before the wall came down.
Oh.
And and you're right with that. It felt like there was a whole new world opening up. Essentially, 2 billion people from Eastern Europe, Soviet Union, China, eventually joining what I call the global workbench, and clearly giving us major economies and efficiencies in the 90s that we all benefited from. And I've seen it work firsthand, and so I still feel somewhat nostalgic about this. But, and here's the big but, the world has changed. And it didn't change with Donald Trump. It didn't change yesterday. It started to change already 10, 15 years ago, and it's rapidly fractionalizing. And as a company, if you're still living in that world of the 1990s, in a system and in a world that is fractionalizing, it's not going to be a good fit. So you have to build a lot more resilience. You have to build a lot more local responsibility. You have to break down overly complex global supply chains. You simply have to make your business more relevant to each of the countries you're serving. And in that process, you probably also have to question how many countries do you want to serve? Because many large global companies are simply spread out too thinly into too many markets, and they don't connect well with these countries. And that is, in my opinion, the name of the game now. The other one that I'm sure we'll touch upon later is from a technology point of view, AI is reshaping very rapidly how a company administers itself inside. And, what used to be floors and floors of people, and obviously lots of onboarding opportunities for all of you after graduation, I think is rapidly slimming down to something that is AI powered, data driven, and essentially a much leaner, faster, and less people intense organization.
Mm.
And so that's going to be changing the job markets for you pretty significantly.
So let's talk a little bit about that because I want to maybe contrast two perspectives on AI. One is perhaps the user perspective
Hmm.
on the one hand, and the other one is how do you sort of shape businesses and business models with AI. So let me just do a check, and I don't know the answer to this, so we'll find out together. Of you, who uses AI, a ChatGPT, or another large language model every day? Show your hands. Who uses it every week, if not every day? Okay, so that's another third. And then who uses it less than once per week, like maybe once per month or rarely ever? So no one. So two-thirds of people use it every day, and one-third of people use it at least weekly. Do you have any perspective about how it is if you go into a company, if you go to the top layers of a company, how do people use AI there? And 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 how do they use AI also to reshape how the company works?
Let me push back slightly against the hands up because I feel you're probably too modest. More of you are using AI than show their hands because a lot goes on behind the curtain. And these days, when you use regular, straightforward Google, there's already AI enablement in there. So it's going to be embedded in so much more of IT that we have used in the past, and we don't even feel it that way. And so I think the same takes place at the top of an organization. Obviously, the more senior, the older people get, the less they experiment with new technologies. I think that's human nature. But let me also say, just being a user is not good enough. What you have to understand is exactly catering to your second question, how can you use AI to build administrative processes? How can you use AI to build business models? So what's the use case of it? What are the pitfalls? Just being a private user, I think that's a consumer attitude. But what you have to do is you have to understand what AI can do and what it can't do, and then with that as a building block, try to help shape organizations. That's where the value added is coming from. But that's a higher level of involvement.
I mean, I find that quite daunting actually because I'm already pretty proud that I use actively some AI models, some large language models every day in my job, and I see productivity gains, I see efficiency gains. I use it to
Yeah.
transcribe, I use it to translate, I use it to sort of prime ideas and so on and so forth. Um, when you say that's not enough, um, let's dig a little bit deeper on that. So if you look at a company like Siemens, how to the extent that you already know that, of course, because I know you're in the board and you're discovering the company, let's say in the course of the next few months still. To what extent is a company like Siemens, let me put it that way, that how do they actually now transform their own company and their own business model with AI? How does that happen?
So there's a layer that's specific to Siemens, and then there's a layer that's pretty much general purpose. The one that's specific to Siemens, when you're selling building automation, factory automation, and the likes, obviously you have to embed AI tools into these solutions. And hence, that's why the company is investing so much in AI right now to be sure that these capabilities augment whatever the hardware has to offer. And so that's the business strategy because you're dealing essentially with an information intensive uh, product and service. that needs to be improved through AI. But then what I'm referring to is in a general administration, no matter whether it's Siemens, Nestlé, or anyone else, I mean, there's lots of efficiencies that over time can be lifted through AI. And how to do that, how to watch out for the pitfalls, and how to design efficiency and stability into the system. I think that is a key point. When I'm saying efficiency and stability, I'm sure lots of you that have experimented with this, you notice that sometimes to the same question, you might get different answers. Now, that's fine when you're doing a little bit of research because you can compare and contrast. That's not fine when you're preparing your annual financial report, okay? Because that has to be accurate. It's also not fine when you're doing quality assurance. And so this is where I think AI still has a long way to go. It'll get there eventually, but it's important that understanding the pitfalls and how to construct them out of the system so that you get a reliable result that benefits from AI without falling victim to some of the hallucination that we've all seen.
Right. That's something I've heard also from other people who work in similar industries that say, when along these lines, but for example, I spoke to the chairman of Schneider Electric last week, and he said when you are managing an energy system, when you have to make sure that there's electricity in every household or even just to power a factory, you can't have hallucinations. And that's what you're talking about. Now, on the other hand, I suppose uh, once that is resolved, and give me an estimate if you have one or a guesstimate when that might be, but once that's done, then of course you're going to start to see that companies really start to do things very differently in terms of what was done by humans up until now will be done by the machine, so to speak, as of then. Is that right?
Yeah, and look, I don't think it'll ever be completely resolved. I think it'll be drastically reduced, but then you still have to build, just like with humans who do work, this quality assurance, you have to build AI layers of quality assurance or cross-checking into the system or into the process that you're designing to be sure that whatever comes out of it is reliable to a larger degree than just, one system alone. Interesting factoid, I was just in Silicon Valley a few weeks ago, and we're talking with doctors at Stanford University Hospital. And it was about the use of AI in a clinical setting. So basically, the doctor using AI to better diagnose disease. And what I didn't know before that a doctor even touch the system, you need 3 full days of recognizing or learning of mandatory training, recognizing hallucinations or other algorithm-based mistakes. Because the stakes with the patient are so high, if you misdiagnose, obviously there's a human tragedy behind it, but there's also
And so that
significant legal
becomes sort of
liability.
part of the new skill that people that go into the job market today need to develop is they should absolutely master everything you can ask an AI model, but then they should also the real skill that they should have and what will make them stand out is to identify whether or not there might be a mistake in the answer.
Recognize the limitations, but also recognize what you can do with it, what you can build with it. And that goes far beyond just a normal user attitude.
Mm. I want to ask you one other question about the big business perspective, sort of how you look at business, and this is related to the work that we do together. We're trying to find out, and we may write about this. We're trying to find out how should businesses be led in the future, and the model that I think most of us know and that you were part of, as you said, for most of your career, was this model of a large multinational company that was basically sprawling both geographically and in terms of the business that it was involved in. You believe that going forward, we'll see less of that and more of, let's say, a more focused company. Could you tell us a little bit more about that and why you think that's going to be the model going forward?
Absolutely. So Peter and I are working on a book, and in case any of you want to pre-order, let us know, and it will come back once it's ready. But obviously, just like I was saying, many multinational companies used to be overextended geographically in that they felt in this old system that they could serve all far corners of the world. I think what you've also seen in the past decades was over diversification into product lines that were true diversification, not related, not synergistic to each other. And obviously, the world has very little patience for that these days. You have to simplify organizations so that you're serving geographies that are truly synergistic, and that you're serving product lines that are truly synergistic. And if there is over complexity in the organization, both from an investor point of view, from a competitor point of view, there's less and less room to have that happen. So, the way someone put it to me, you don't want to be a decathlonian in a world of single sports athletes. And so clearly, what you have to focus on is that single sport and excel at it. And you have to take complexity out that takes your attention away from excelling in this one discipline in which you want to be truly the best. To me, in a world that with digital surroundings has ever more intensity of competition, it's a logical consequence.
Mm.
Basically, any mediocrity where you say, okay, look, I may not be the best one in the three of my businesses, but they're nicely diversified, that's no longer good enough because you may end up losing in all three of them. Or if you're saying, well, I'm serving 150 countries, if one of them is going well, the other one is not doing so well. Well, these days, when you are competing against true best in class local companies, you may lose out in 120 of your 150 markets.
Right.
And hence, that intense focus on one thing and one thing only, I think over time will pay off. And that's why you see so many corporate breakups, demergers, and companies essentially focusing on what they do best.
And of course, we are seeing that across industries. It happened at Siemens, which has
Yeah.
Siemens Energy now, Siemens Healthineers, I think, and maybe one or two more of them. You've seen it at the biggest company of the 20th century, General Electric. They've sort of split up into three parts, and you can go on and on. That's the evolution that you actually already see happening in the market. I suppose the one counter argument to that would be, this idea of resilience, of counter-cyclical businesses. If one part of the world doesn't go well, then maybe another one will do well. If one industry is not performing well, then another industry might perform well. That would have been, I suppose, the argument for the conglomerate, for the multinational. What happens to that argument?
Yeah. And I think that one, which used to be the most frequent argument in the past, that got already debunked, in my view, in the 1980s by one of the worldwide
Most people
strategy
here weren't
gurus.
born yet then, so
I'm sorry about that.
you'll have to
Okay, so
explain. You'll have to
yeah, so
explain.
let me go back to the 1980s. So someone who's still alive, Professor Michael Porter, used to be the strategy star of the 1980s, and he basically said, "Look, the company shouldn't diversify; the investor does that."
Mm.
And so, I mean, when you're benefiting with your savings or your investments, when you're investing in the fund or whatever, from diversified holdings, why do you want underneath that the company to diversify if that makes things so much more complex? And by the way, for an investor, if they say, I see a promising investment in Siemens, they can buy the share, as you know, for fractions on a dollar, simply on the stock exchange. If Siemens wants to invest in a new area of business, if they buy a company, first of all, you pay a premium because when you buy the entire company, not just one share, you pay a premium. Then you have massive integration costs as you connect basically what you just bought to the mothership. Then you run it together. So you have to learn how that moves and you may make your rookie mistakes. And then eventually, maybe if 10 years down the road you decide you want to sell it, you have a massive carve out operation where you sever again the lines of communication, everything from, the mothership to the entity you want to sell.
Right.
Then you sell it, and when you sell it, typically you don't get the full market price. So you're losing every step of the way. So for a company to invest in entire businesses is a lot less efficient than it is for you to buy one stock of GE, one stock of Siemens, one stock of Nestlé at a time. And when you don't like them, you sell them. And the little provision you pay is a fraction of what a company would have to face.
Right. There's a cost to complexity is sort of the argument. Um, I want to shift now because since you mentioned the 1980s, Mark, and you said you were alive, and not only alive, you were already a student in the 1980s. So basically, let's go back in time to that period, not specifically because we want to know more about that period, but because we want to know more about you when you were the age of the students. Now you speak extremely eloquently and, of course, with a lot of mastery about the big picture of our business. I assume, I hope for all of us, including myself, that when you were 20 years old, you weren't yet speaking about business in that way, and you didn't yet know everything at that point in time. Who was Mark when he was 20 years old?
Yeah, look, I mean, obviously, with these 40 years, there comes experience, and that's certainly helpful to build this perspective. But what was already there is the firm will and intention to go into global business.
Mm,
And obviously, when you start your career, you don't know exactly where eventually you'll end up. But I mean, the idea that I would want to enter a business, I would want to enter a global place that gets me around the planet and gives me global perspective. And that eventually, yes, I mean, you'll try to go as far as you can, and hopefully one day you make CEO. That ambition was there.
that ambition to sort of go far and also to be part of a big global story.
Yeah.
Where,
By the way,
yeah.
maybe as a footnote, funny episode. We had a finance professor at the time in St. Gallen who looked at people like me and looked us straight in the eye and said, "I know you guys want to be out there, and one day you all want to run IBM or whatever. But let me give you a piece of advice. The best life you have if you inherit from your uncle a gravel pit right outside of a large city.
Mm,
There's no simpler way to make money. The truck comes, you basically put the gravel in, you write the bill, you smile all the way to the back. And I know you guys want to have it very complicated. You want to be around the globe. You want to do all sorts of fancy things. But one day you'll learn that maybe there's a different perspective to life. And then that gravel pit will come back to your mind. And he has a point in that, global life and a global executive life, while I would certainly choose it again, it's not for everyone. Okay. And so it's important to take a step back and to kind of feel, okay, is it all right for me? And even if you like it, I can tell you there's been many, many lonely nights when the airport closes and when you're jet lagged out of your mind and when you're saying to yourself, "What am I
right.
doing out here?"
Yeah.
Okay, and so that's the price you're paying, and certainly it's also not particularly conducive to a harmonious, full presence family life. So there's costs to it, and it's important to kind of be realistic about that. But if you love it, then yeah, if you feel that passion, go for it, and then hone it and pursue it.
What was the choice that you made right out of university? What was your first employer and where?
Yeah, it was a bit mangled at the time because I mean, what I wanted to do, I always had this dream. I wanted to go to U.S. college. There was no scholarship funding. We didn't have the money to do it at home, and so then if that didn't work, obviously graduate school was of interest. So I applied to Harvard Business School. And what I got was what was called a deferred admission. So an admission that requires that you work full time for 2 years at a real business before you get taken. And so that one put me a bit in a bind because today getting a job for 2 years or a time limited job is a lot easier. At the time, people wanted to take people young and then really keep them for decades. And so with that, I ended up with a family held German multinational company called Haniel, and the attraction there was that early on, first of all, they had the flexibility to only employ me for 2 years and then let me go again. But I liked it so much that after Harvard Business School, I came
Returned.
back because their big selling point was that in small units, they would give you general management responsibility early on. And they were true to the word. So essentially, a year after rejoining, after business school, I ran a unit with 700 people and 130 million Swiss francs in revenue.
That's a very rapid ascension, Mark. I'm trying to look for sort of nuggets that we can all relate to, even if we're not immediately off to the races in Harvard Business School and then into the management. What were some of the episodes that you can remember when you were looking for your way, where you perhaps had a little bit more questions than answers?
Yeah, look, I mean, coming back to this question, with the business education today, you can go many different ways. And you can go into large global businesses, you can go into the startup scene, you can go into consulting and banking, you can go into social entrepreneurship. So there's lots of options out there. And honestly, on that one, you and your generation, I mean, no one has it easy. And I understand there's challenges and the job market isn't cool right now. But the sheer number of options you have, you're blessed with that. Okay. And so I think it is important. to use the time as students to also sit back and reflect on, okay, where's my true inner calling? And only you can answer that. So if there's a great CEO out here, telling a wonderful story, don't try to be him or her. Okay. Or if you read about someone else in the media that looks cool, an entrepreneur that started a company, well, think about the other 10 that failed. And so you have to love what you're doing. Even in the end, you may not reach the ultimate dream job that you have in mind. I mean, it's the process that matters. And if you don't enjoy the process, then you may not have that true passion for what you're doing. And
Um,
so listening to yourself on that and what do you need? So when I was saying earlier, global job, not exactly easy on the family, how important is the family aspect to you? How important is it to you that you have enough time for yourself, for your other hobbies or whatever? And so trying to come up with something that's truly you, I think that is something that during the student years with your summer jobs, internships, what have you, I think that discovery is one of the key accomplishments.
Now, one of the things that you were also fascinated by, and I think you still are, is the United States,
Yep.
right? You were originally, I think, from Germany, right?
Yep.
And so you got to live in the US at various stages in your life, and you really sought that out.
Yep.
Tell us a little bit more about that sort of dream of the United States and how you made that dream come to life.
Yeah, so that was a lifelong thing. I was born and raised in Germany, but always wanted to look for that first opportunity to be a student over there. Again, it didn't work for my college years, but then certainly it worked out for the graduate student years. And spent a lot of time in the 90s, eventually became a green card holder, and then 2003 also became a citizen. And frankly, it's one of those where and to those of you who live there, I mean, this is probably not the best moment to do the advertising for the United States, but you're signing on to a system. And when you're sworn in, you see people from all walks of life, from some Hong Kong multimillionaires to Mexican farmhands who lived there long enough. And you see in the pride in which they sign into the Constitution, the values it stands for, and basically how that created over almost 250 years what the country is today. And by the way, in those 250 years, we've seen good presidents, mediocre presidents, bad presidents. What endured is the system, okay? And it withstood the test of time, and just like Switzerland did. And that to me is one of the fascinations
Mm.
that, whatever was set up there almost 250 years ago withstood that test of time and withstood easy moments, but also hardship. And
So you made that choice first of all as a student. You could go and study there. You were
yeah,
accepted, so that's of course based on essays and so on.
yeah,
Then afterwards, you also get a chance to go and work in the U.S. This is sort of a deal that you make with your employer, right? It's like they expand the U.S. They're looking for the right people, and you're like saying, "Okay, I want to be that person that goes to the United States." What was that like?
yeah. So look, I mean, when you're one of 800 graduates from Harvard Business School, and when you're competing on the U.S. job market against an American graduate, I mean, clearly people don't want to go through a lot of effort for visa and work permits and what have you. That's kind of hard to do. And so, as part of this inspection, I kind of felt, okay, what's my unique selling proposition? And the unique selling proposition is, well, I got to know my way around the US, but I come from Europe. And so working for a European firm and helping them navigate the US seemed to me a much better niche than trying to basically face American graduate students in
Right.
the job market one for one, where, clearly they know their home market so much better than I do. I mean, they grew up there. I only got to know it for a few years at the time. And so I think understanding where aside from what you want to do, what is your unique selling proposition? What is it that you have that makes you very special to an employer and gives you an edge to the next student that comes along and applies for a job? I think that's another key area of reflection because at the end of the day, look, I mean, people want to give you a job not out of courtesy. They want to give you a job because you solve problems for them. And so understanding which problems you can solve better than anyone else here in the room or out there as you're competing with other students. I think that is also a key thought pattern.
Right. And obviously, that's one that you mastered at that time. You convinced, I suppose, it was Haniel to then say, I'll come back to Europe. I'll be part of the growth story here. But at some point, I'd love an opportunity to build the story in the US, and that worked out. Another element of your career, which I find interesting, is that you've also built your niche, let's say, in being an expert in the finance world. You know very well, the numbers. You've been CFO, and that was sort of part of your journey from from executive committee, from management to becoming CEO. Tell us a little bit more about that, because that's actually a rather common trajectory, I think.
It's common, but then obviously you have a number of paths to the top. I mean, the two most common ones are either from the marketing and sales end or from the finance end. But you've also seen, depending on the industry that we're talking about, we've seen quite a few people coming from the technology/operations area. So Tim Cook, used to be supply chain,
Of
okay,
Apple,
of Apple, yes, and then these days, I guess, a lot more people, as businesses are being transformed by digital and AI opportunities, will also come with that background. Whereas in the past, I mean, the career advice I got early on is, okay, if you want to be the IT guy, then join IT. But this won't get you very far. Obviously, the world has changed, and I think these days, understanding data, understanding the data architecture of a company, and how you can run processes on it is a key ingredient to competitive success. So I think here again, don't pick it tactically on where you think, okay, most people made it through finance or most people made it through marketing. Um, Pick it by, remember, for the longest time, you won't be CEO, you will be working towards that position. So, what is it truly that makes you go pat and that really sort of motivates you? And that's the one that eventually you'll be good in. And because you're good in it, you'll really have a chance then to stand out.
mm. That's sort of this idea that you'll go farthest when you find something that where you combine not just what you like, but also what you're good at and what the world needs. That's sort of this idea of I think it's called ikigai nowadays in modern terminology, and that's really the sweet spot. That's how you get the farthest, not by doing what everybody else does, not by doing whatever the new hottest trend is, but by finding that sort of middle ground between what you're good at, what the world needs, and what the company needs. You eventually, of course, became CEO, and actually, you're one of a rare species of multiple CEOs, of serial CEOs. You've had the honor to lead both the DAX company. This is one of the largest companies in Germany, and a what I would call, as a Fortune journalist, a Fortune 500 company, one of the largest companies in the world, which is Nestlé. That's really exceptional. How does that happen? You obviously do a good job at what you do. You get asked to become CEO. Um, you've been CEO, I think, at Fresenius for more than a decade. Um, how does that happen that then afterwards you're asked to become CEO elsewhere? Walk us through what happened in that time. Why did you stay there so long, and how did you get asked to then become CEO of Nestle?
Yeah, look, I stayed there so long because I liked it. I felt it was a nice, rewarding environment where both inside the company and to the board, I felt well connected, appreciated, good compatibility when it comes to values. And honestly, I mean, we're talking about the year 2015, 2016. I wasn't thinking, I was 50 years old at the time. I wasn't thinking about changing. I wasn't thinking, let's apply for something new. It was a great job. The company was doing really well. And
The
so
medical device,
medical device, medical services,
yeah.
and
We wouldn't know it if we were not a patient.
yeah, I wish you're never going to be a customer because I mean, obviously, it's for pretty serious diseases. Most of all, kidney failure, and those are diseases you don't want to wish onto anyone. But
But a huge company because it was the world leader in that field, right?
in that field, and so it was essentially about 7 billion euros revenue when I took the role in 2003. and it was about 30 billion euros in revenue when I left in 2016. It's a fairly large firm, hardware and services, which is unusual in healthcare, and a lot of fun. And to this day, by the way, healthcare is probably the one industry that personally I feel most involved with, where I found my home because um, it's data driven, which, to a former CFO is always something that's appealing. Um, you can really compare and contrast products and therapies, like this one is better than that. And so there's an obvious ranking that you can use. Whereas, on many softer marketing claims, you don't really know I mean, is one yogurt really better than another? You don't know unless you sort of go into the finer chemistry of it. And so I liked it a lot. And it also, when that call for Nestle came out of the blue, the reason I got interested is that through medicine, I also came to realize how important it is that we all focus on good, proper nutrition. Because, I mean, clearly we were taking care of very sick people. Modern
That's sort
medicine
of the end of the line almost.
is the end of the line. What you really want to do is prevent the onset of disease, and nutrition is, in my opinion, the key part of that. And as part of my personal story, I always liked sports. And um, if you'd asked me 30, 40 years ago, is it more important to work out or to eat right? I would have told you, well, if you work out enough, it doesn't matter what you eat. And that was plain wrong because, I mean, clearly between the two, while both are important, I mean, clearly good regular nutrition that sort of doesn't overfeed you, doesn't underfeed you on essential micronutrients is exactly what gives you the best prognosis.
Mm.
So this is what completely changed.
And so that's where it's a very interesting point that you raise here because I've had the pleasure, of course, of being at your home and I saw that you eat really healthily. You even often cook yourself or sort of decide the ingredients to sort of make sure that you are eating right. And so it's really interesting to know now, as you say it, that this personal passion of yours was then something that you could apply in your professional life. And so I think it speaks to the earlier point that you made that if you want to be really good at something, you have to find challenges where you're both good at, but you're also passionate about and what the world needs, which was the case in this case, I suppose, for Nestle.
Yeah, my happiest days at Nestle, I mean, it's either at the research and development labs in Lausanne, where about 60% of Nestle's R&D budget gets spent. And then there was a little secret, and that is right above my office. So you take a secret stair. There was actually a test kitchen. And so once a month, some of these people from the R&D center would come and select members of our management team. We would then have what we call a trial lunch. And so this was latest and greatest thinking. Not all of it good, okay? But that was the whole point, that in a small group, without taking much risk, you could try out new things, and then we would score that. And they would walk home with their feedback from a small select group of people. And we would also see what they're working on. And those were probably the funniest days.
That's an amazing anecdote. Did any of those products make it into the stores here in
Um,
Switzerland that we know of?
yeah, so I mean, obviously, we know this whole vegan boom, like plant-based burgers and so forth, that subsided a little bit. But initially, this whole idea, if Impossible Meats, Impossible Foods, or Beyond Meat, if they can do a burger like this, we can do that too. That surfaced at one of these lunches in 2018. Then, essentially, within a year's time, we had a very competitive burger out there called Garden Gourmet, and it sold really well in Switzerland.
Oh, that's amazing.
And also a few others along those lines that are plant based. These days, unfortunately,
We're
harder to
back to
change.
real meat.
Yeah.
Maybe one final question before we get to the questions from the students. You've had, of course, these two amazing and long runs at two public large companies, and then the last one ended abruptly, I think about a year or so ago, which it for anyone who's ever been through a moment like that where somebody else makes a decision, a professional decision or personal decision, you have to find a way to deal with that, to overcome that.
Yeah.
Now, of course, you've overcome that in the most amazing way, in the sense that you're going to be appointed chairman of Siemens. But I suppose that there must have been a moment or a period in which you sort of had to process all of this and had to question again a couple of things. Could you take us into that moment and
Sure.
how you came out of that?
Yeah. And look, here again, let me take you back to something that one of my professors at Harvard Business School said. In a setting like this, he looked us all in the eye and said, look, more likely than not, at some point in your career, you will get fired, fail, or simply not reach your objectives. And you better mentally prepare yourselves for that, because the fact it'll happen to you is not something to be ashamed of. But how you handle yourself in that moment, that's going to be key for your own happiness, but then also for your professional reputation going forward. And so what that meant to me is, first of all, I mean, even if you feel that maybe they shouldn't have happened, I mean, you have to overcome that. Don't be bitter. Life's too short for that. And one of my favorite slogans is, if you don't like something, get mad about it, but then get over it. Okay. Don't carry a crutch with you for long periods of time. No one's interested in that. Okay. Everyone remembers Nestle. No one remembers me. That's okay. Okay. Because Nestle is a 160-year-old institution, and that's a lot bigger than one person. Second thing is, don't let that discourage you. I mean, if this is the job you like, if this is the business and the environment you want to be in, then don't give up and look for something else. And then the third one is, be considerate in how you're doing that. Don't decide too quickly. So, I mean, on Siemens, for example, since I knew the current chair, that call came very quickly. Like, would you want to take this job from me? Um, and I thanked him very much at this time for considering me. But I also said, look, Jim, um, this just happened. I need a few weeks to calm down. I need a few weeks to sort out my preferences. I need to talk to family. I need to be sure I'm doing the right thing. And then I can tell you with a handshake that I'm really going to do it, because that's also a multi-year commitment, and I want the company to rely on that.
Mm.
And so, again, overcoming things, processing things, putting really things behind you and not bearing grudges is step one. But then also take a bit of downtime, just like I was saying, for you as students, to try to understand what is your next course of action. For professional mid-career, it's the same thing. You basically take a bit of time out. You look at what you have realistically left this time and what do you want to do with this. And then you sleep over it a few times and see whether it's stable or not, because sometimes, what may appear attractive day one looks a little different 2 or 3 weeks later. And once you feel that you're really safe with it, then you do the step.
Mm. And I assume you're still very happy with your choice, because of course you will be at some point appointed. Is that clear? Is it going to be next year or the year after? Is that
Yeah, so the latest point in time is early 27. So I assume we'll do the handover sometime next year.
That's excellent. Well, thank you so much for sharing this advice with you. I now want to give the opportunity to some students to ask some questions. Go ahead. I'll see two questions over here, and one there. We'll take questions by two. So if we can have the microphone here and one over there with the lady, and then two sets of questions and two sets of answers. Does that work for you, Mark?
Perfect.
And if you want to just tell us who you are or something about yourself, and then ask your question.
Hello, my name is Shanglin, and my question is that I always have the idea that AI is genius because it can process many informations than the human mind. But I also think that AI is idiot because the only thing that it can do is gather information. He or she do not have the mind of way of thinking like human do. So I use AI like a tool, like an assistant. I give the task and it helps me to gather information. And in the end, I make decision myself, not AI. We have instinctively know how to grab a pen, but we might not know in the beginning how to catch a pen in a right way. Same with AI, we know how to type words to let it give us answer, but we do not maybe correctly know that how can we get answer effectively and efficient. So AI is nowadays in these 5 years develops a lot, influencing our world in huge impact. but we have less lessons, less educated about. Are there anyone to teach us how to use AI in the right way? So my question is that can you give us some suggestions about what relationships we need to deal with AI and how can we live with AI? Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. And we'll get also the second question. And just a reminder, we mostly want to focus on the question, a little bit less on the preamble. Over there. Yeah.
Hi, my name is Zama. I'm studying global banking and finance. And guten Abend. Ich wohne in Stuttgart. And so I have a two-parter for you, Mr. Mark Schneider. My first part is that if you worked with Eva Scherer, because I think right now she's the CFO of Daimler Truck, and she used to be a board member at Siemens. And the second part of this question has to do with how difficult it is, especially for someone who's not from Germany. So maybe you can give a broader perspective over that. For someone who's not from Germany to be able to have a career journey the same way that she has, because she's an inspiration for me and for all my other colleagues. And if you think it's a possibility to be able to have this kind of ambition in a country like Germany, where most of the work is done in German. However, foreigners that want to come in, break into the market and, ensure the globalization of Daimler Truck and how we can have a financial career in this type of environment. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So the question on AI and a question on Germany. Do they go well together? I'm curious.
It's an interesting flow. But look, on AI, as much as I would like to point to a textbook, I think we're all in this room self-taught in it, because at the end of the day, it is so recent that you have to basically try to find your way into it, depending on what job you're doing and what particular aspect of AI you're dealing with, whether it's something that's more like predictive AI in a manufacturing setting or generative AI in a large language setting. So I think, look, I'm so much older than you guys are. And when it came about, you start like you always start, and that is a journey that begins on Google, and you then try to get to know people that know about it, and you essentially work your way into it. And sometimes you learn something that's wrong, sometimes you pick up something that's right, and you try to get close to people who are experts in the space. I do believe it is critically important that you do deal with it. When I think back over the last 40, 50 years, every 20 years or so, there was a step change in what IT allowed people to do. So early 80s, microcomputing, word processing, Excel files, what have you. 90s, early 2000s, internet, and all the capabilities the internet gave us. And I think now we're at this AI stage. And so, being in the front phase of it and really sort of trying to not just have a user perspective, but understanding how it works and what can be done with it is so important. And I think it's going to be a key competitive skill as you think about the job market going forward in quite a few different settings. So I hope that answers the question, but spend time on it and go and ask around. Not every meeting, not every discussion is going to be efficient, but on something that is so new and unstructured, I think there's no other way of learning your way into it. Now, on Germany, so I don't know if more closely, because I only got elected to the Siemens board in February, so I don't have a longer history with the company. Obviously, Germany and the German business scene, they know very well that they need to become a lot more inclusive on a whole lot of dimensions. So, different skill sets, gender, of course. It's a conservative country. It's something to be aware of. But people know they have to change if they want to continue competing successfully in a global setting, and one where specialists with unique skills and talents may come from different parts of the world. And unless you keep them there, you'll have a competitive disadvantage. That, to me, by the way, is one of the biggest differences between Germany and Switzerland, that Switzerland has always been able to attract talent from around the globe. People want to live here. They want to come here. And usually, as you see with myself, even after a job is finished, they like it as a place to live. And that is not always the case for a German environment. Nonetheless, because especially the larger companies are so much aware of it, I think there is good opportunity because they know that unless they start to be more inclusive, they simply won't persist in global competition.
That's, I think, as a follow-up, would you say that if you're in the job market and you're going for a job, is that something that you want to actually say to people? You want to remind people of that's the challenge, like you should become more inclusive, or should you just show up and be part of the answer rather than to sort of call it out?
I wouldn't call it out, but if we think back to what we discussed earlier, and where is your unique selling proposition? So just like I made that link between Europe and the US, if you're knowledgeable about the German environment, what else is it where you can actually contribute and where you can, bring experiences and insights to a German business that otherwise they wouldn't have? And then you look at the companies that are out there and who are the ones that would have most of that need. And from that intersection, try to work your way forward. But to me, calling it out, frankly, if someone doesn't get it, calling it out usually
It's
doesn't
not gonna help.
So, yeah.
I will have 2 more questions, so let's see where there's some more. One over there and one over there. And we'll try to do it like a rapid round, rapid fire, because we only have a few minutes left. Go ahead.
Is it
Yeah.
okay? So good evening, Mr. Schneider. My name is Christian. I really liked your comment where you said that the U.S. In your interest with the U.S. I really liked your comment where you said that the presidents might change for better or for worse for the country, but the system stays the same. Recently, President Trump pardoned the Binance CEO who a couple of years ago pled guilty to money laundering. So my question is the following: do you still think that the U.S. justice system favors actual justice, or has it changed where if you're rich enough and influential enough, you can almost get away with fraud?
Thank you. And we did a question there.
Yes, thank you very much. I just wanted to ask, by the way, my name's Eric. Thank you for giving me permission to ask my question. I wanted to ask, what was that process like of becoming a CEO? I know there's a lot of history to uncover there, but I'd like to know what the rise was like, the challenges, and how you eventually made it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. Yeah, look, on the US, that history of pardoning people, that's a long history. Okay, so this didn't start just a few weeks ago, didn't start with President Trump. And you've seen in particular towards the end of a term, there's usually quite a few choices that you could call entirely questionable. Yeah. And so sometimes it's built on money, sometimes it's built on personal connections that, someone just knew someone who's close to the president. That's not always super transparent. And but that has been, look, no system is perfect. And when I'm usually defending the US, I'm not defending everything they do. Okay. But I still think that on balance, it is a great country that people, since we talked about Germany a second ago, that people want to move to and live in. And it gives a lot of opportunity, has given a lot of opportunity over many generations. Does it have imperfections? Oh, yes, it does. And that's just the reality that you have to, it's sometimes higher highs and lower lows than you may find in some other countries. Now, on the CEO track, look, obviously, the important thing is on the way there to do well on the jobs you're doing then and there. And that's what people judge you by. And then with that, at some point, you get close enough to the top of an organization where people then start to consider you. If you're joining an organization and you talk about being the CEO, it's a little too early, okay? You join an organization, you do well on these first jobs, these first career rungs, so that people say, look, he or she is a fantastic salesperson or finance person or what have you. And then at some point, when you're getting closer to general management, what you then have to demonstrate is what I call true general management thinking, where you're no longer just blowing the horn of your function, but rather you wear a big hat and you're basically thinking for the entire organization. So if you're in marketing, don't just beat everyone up for a larger marketing budget, but show how it benefits the entire company. And so widening your perspective, at these one or two levels below CEO, that you can really think in general management terms for the entire organization, that to me is an essential qualification that any board is looking for.
Excellent. Mark, thank you for it. And that made me chuckle because I had a friend and he was in a job interview early on in his career. And the CEO asked him, so where do you see yourself in 10 or 15 years? And my friend said, well, I'd like to be in your chair. And that apparently was the wrong answer because he didn't get the job. So now we understand why. But Mark, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom with us. We, of course, look forward to seeing what you're going to be doing in the future. We know one part of it, and the other part is that we're going to write a book together. Now we get the sneak preview. Thank you so
remember
much,
those pre-orders.
Mark, and thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you so much.